And welcome to this Superversive SF live stream. I don't think anyone's listening to yet, but that's all right. We, by our own admission, we've organised this at the last minute. So we thought on this live stream we'd talk about the Dragon Awards, although I totally forgot the Hugos were on this weekend. So we're going to chat about that briefly as well, because a few people had a few things to say. Hey, we've got some viewers. Hey, viewers. On this live stream, we've got a few people. We've got Daddy Warpig is back. Dawn, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Is it a V or a W?
Think of the alcohol. It's Whiskey.
Whiskey. Oh, that's fine. No, that's good, because I always pronounce Ben's name wrong, which is Vitsky. But anyway, that's fine. And we have John and Judgy Wright, who always join us.
I can't pronounce Ben's name at all.
It's all good. We'll all get
Wheeler? Am I the only one who can pronounce Wheeler? Is that?
No, Zvitsky.
No, not Wheeler. Ben with a
Wheeler's
Z.
easy.
Zvitsky.
Which is written as a wiki.
Wheeler I can handle.
Wheeler's easy. So, now that we're all here, just before we kick off, a bunch of the Superversive SF folks, including Ben Zvitsky from the Czech Republic and myself from Australia, will be at DragonCon if anyone's there, and maybe we'll try and organise a live stream from DragonCon. Yeah, we've got a fortnight, we'll figure it out. We've got 3 weeks, we'll figure it out. Anyway, so on this show, we're going to talk about the Dragon Awards, the nominees, what we all think about what's going forward, things that have happened with it. And yeah, but first up, apparently the Hugos were this weekend, and lots of women won, which people were cheering about, but I heard Ghostbusters didn't win, and Arrival won instead, and I was bitterly disappointed because judging by the rest of the stuff that won, it would have been the perfect cherry on the crap sandwich that is the Hugos if Ghostbusters had won. So I was a bit disappointed. But anyway.
Well, I will tell you why I was disappointed that the Ghostbusters movie did not win. It's because the Hugo Awards were quite clearly going out of their way to make a statement about diversity, about inclusiveness, and yet on the most popular art form and I understand the Hugos are for literature. I really do. But the most popular art form in the world right now is movies. And if it was important, the most important thing to make a clear statement about advancing diversity and inclusiveness was about the movies. It's about cinema. It's about getting people in the seats, especially a movie that from the very beginning was attacked by vicious, evil, nasty people on the internet. The fact that the Hugos did not stand up for diversity, that the Hugo voters did not stand up for inclusiveness, that they turned their back on 3 women comedians, one of whom is a person of color. Turned their back on it.
The fourth one you think was not funny enough to be a comedian?
I think it was disgusting. I think it was depressing. And I really, really wish that instead of going for something traditional, they had the guts to do something that was groundbreaking and new. A comedy movie without any comedy in it. How can you not vote for something that amazing?
I was wondering when the Bob was coming.
So I understand that Chuck Tingle was up for fan award, as was Jeffro. And Jeffro came out 7 of 6. And Chuck Tingle was only about 60 or 70 votes below the person who won.
On the first ballot, yeah. But they did that weird Australian vote runoff thing. And so when everything was over, he ended up 5th, right above no award.
Yeah. And we have with us today an actual 7 out of 6 winner of the Hugo Awards of 2017, John C. Wright.
Yes, my short story won the coveted position of being voted below no award, and in celebration of which I want to read just one paragraph, below that 2 paragraphs from one of the stories that were placed above me, and I don't remember the name of the story. Let me quote just really quickly, because this was considered better than my work. I was playing at being immortal this century because I love cigarettes and shawarma, and it's easier to order shawarma if your piercing shriek doesn't drive the delivery boy mad. Mortality is fun and in small doses. It's very authentic, down in the dirt nitty-gritty. There are lullabies and lily pads and summer rainstorms, and hardly anyone ever tries to cut your head off out of some moronic, heroic obligation to the gods. If you want to sit on your ass and read a book, nobody judges you. Also, shawarma. My spirit was already flown back before the deed was done. Back to the nest, back to the egg. My sisters clucked and cooed and gently scolded. They incubated me with their great feathery bottoms, as they had many times before, as I had done many times before them. Sisters have to look out for one another. We're all we've got, and forever's a long, slow slog without love. The story was called Talents Can Crush Galaxies. Now, I must admit my story that was up for an award was not my best work, but I have decided that Bottoms is such a delightful tagline that if I'm ever chosen by the Batman to be one of his boy sidekicks, I will use that as my battle cry and my tagline. Great feathery bottoms. And in ejaculation, it can fit any situation.
I suspect at this
so
point,
whenever
John,
someone says, "How does it feel to be?" Say again.
I suspect at this point, John, that you're more likely to be employed as Alfred the Butler.
Great feathery bottoms, but I think it's an expression that can fit any situation perfectly. So I believe the Hughes committee voted correctly.
Hey, John.
So I wish to salute
another
them.
one of the Hugo winner short stories that won against John, I think.
No, wait a minute. Is that Mr. John Scialzi, who I have seen wearing a dress from time to time online, did not win as a representative of the new female gender. That's more female than the females because he chose to be one. Excuse me. So I think it's trans, homophobo, non-sismic of them.
Another of the winning stories that I, at least reading from someone else's website, is about a princess so beautiful that men touch her all the time, and her father says the only way for her to escape is to get married. So at the end, she marries another girl. And this is a science fiction story that can win a Hugo. But John's story, which was a new take on Isaac Asimov's 3 Rules, in which a robot and a human being or not being able to harm each other, got a new twist that Asimov hadn't tried yet. That one was no awarded.
Well, I heard John's story.
It was one of John's best stories. I didn't like it that much, but the idea behind it was real science fiction.
I heard his story was nauseating, though. So from very important people within the community.
I have 3 quick points to make about the Hugos, and then I'll get off these so we can talk about the real fan awards.
Real awards.
Fantasy. My first point is I fell asleep or drifted away while you were reading those 2 paragraphs, so I only caught bits and pieces of it, but it was not interesting enough to hold. It was not interesting enough to hold my attention during even the short recitation. Second point is I think so, I'm echoing really loudly because somebody has me on speaker.
It's John.
Oh, okay.
I muted him. I'll unmute him when he's talking. That's right.
Okay. The best novella, 4 different novellas from Tor.com, that's their website, not the company, the website, publishing, got nominated for best novella. I refuse to believe that anything Tor.com published at all, ever, in the history of history itself, qualifies for best novella, much less 4 of them, much less winning 1. So I thought that was absolutely indicative of the state of the Hugos as a whole. And as far as my own personal involvement in the Hugos, I didn't even remember that they were happening until John Della Rose, who I think just joined us, unless I'm wrong.
Yep. Hi.
Until John Della Rose posted about it the day before saying, oh, by the way, the Hugos are tomorrow. I'm like, oh, the Hugos are tomorrow. And then I completely forgot about it the next day until somebody said, oh, you can't watch the stream anyway because they're having streaming problems. The Hugos are so irrelevant right now that in the space of a year, I've gone from live tweeting them twice in a row to completely forgetting about them because they're that irrelevant. And here's the great thing. The very best thing that I love is they're trying to spin this as being the 2nd highest year for participation at Worldcon, almost a record-breaking year, and yet the nominating ballots and the final votes and attendance at the con is all down 50% over last year, which, let me put that in context. They have lost 50% of their revenue. Lost 50% of their revenue because of people who were spat upon and hurled out and walked away to something better, and it is a hard blow to a convention to suddenly have half the revenue the next year. And there is not another, there absolutely was well deserved. Nobody on the planet deserved that more than the Hugos. That's all I've got.
I will add that John and I also had no idea what was going on, and he was up for a Hugo. The first time he was up for Hugo 2 years ago, we were filled with joy and delight. We were hopeful, and we flew out to Worldcon. This time, we didn't even remember what was going on.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. Is my mic working?
Yeah.
I was more upset about the fact that someone wrote a issue of Dynamic Comics, wrote an issue of Shadow magazine, where the Shadow comes across as an SJW warrior lecturing criminals about their white privilege rather than shooting them in the head, than I was about any Hugo win or loss. I'm interested in it. You see, last year I thought if I won a Hugo, I'd be in the same company as Frank Herbert or Roger Zelazny or some other writer who I admired and appreciated. But it became clear that the award had become a completely political award, awarded for SJW loyalty, not for merit of science fiction. It had nothing to do with science fiction at all, because non-science fiction stories are winning because they have they show some sign of loyalty to intersectionalism, to political correctness. And I don't object to a political award. The Prometheus Awards are openly in favor of science fiction stories that promote libertarianism. But they're honest about it. They say we're a libertarian award. We are libertarians voting for other libertarians. But the Hugos don't say we're a freaky, far left, neurotic crackpot award given to freaky, far left, neurotic crackpots who don't know how to write good science fiction. I mean, I didn't notice it. I simply didn't notice that it was coming, and I'm actually ironically pleased that I got below no award rather than was put into the company of these people. So I'm sorry to the loyal Hugo fans who still think the award means something, but
I saw somebody
reversed
on
its meaning. It no longer means what it used to be.
I saw someone on Facebook gloating that the mainly women winning of the Hugos will make the puppies whine. And I was still rolling my eyes because I was like, first of all, the puppies were never about women or not women or race or not race. We were just about good stories. So we are whimpering and whining about the quality of the stories. But second of all, they just didn't get that we had completely moved on because the Hugos have in fact burned down. They have destroyed themselves.
I made a post this morning about we should do an analysis of the Rabid Puppies and Pulp Revolution and Superversive just as a demographic sort of what percentage of minorities there are and whatnot. We are far more representative than they are. I can tell you that already.
Well, I can tell you among the leadership of the Evil Legion of Evil Authors, which consists of me, Box Day, Larry Correa, and Sarah Hoyt, that I'm the only American white male among them. If you count race, by the way, the social justice warriors count race, because they would count Correa and Hoyt as being Portuguese, as being what's the made-up word for Hispanic or Latino, which is not a race. It's not even a language group. It's a group of language groups. And Vox Day self-identifies as a Red Indian, so he's not even in America. So I'm the only Prussian. I'm the only German in the group because I'm Pennsylvania Dutch.
There you go.
The Nazis used to have a piece of paperwork called an Ahenpass that you had to carry around with you at all times, showing your genealogy so that your specific bloodline could be identified. And the SJWs now basically have one of those that they carry in their heads for every person they run across as to what their exact to identify their exact placed on the hierarchy of victimhood.
Incidentally, John, I think you are culturally insensitive there, and the preferred term is Latinx, which sounds like a weird Marvel superhero.
Oh yeah, it's the best part because the the Spanish language being divided into such a male and female component with the way the words end, having to Americanize it with the X is just the worst cultural appropriation I've ever seen in my entire life. It's hilarious.
I've never heard before. This is how bad it is. I've never heard before anyone having to describe the gender of a language by using some other word than gender, because the word gender now no longer means what it means, thanks to these people. So the Hugo Awards have wished themselves into complete oblivion. No, there's one thing that I noticed in the winning, which is that Glyer, I forget his first name, the guy who's won 50 Hugo Awards, Mike Glyer, is it? I forget his name.
Mike. It's Mike.
Did not win because he was a male. Instead, I believe it was a
ladies
female run.
Yeah,
female run lady business by I have the awards up in front of me on my internet. Lady business headed by Claire, Ira, Jody, KJ, Rane, and Susan, which they only have first names or initials. Because they're in a post naming situation.
Maybe the Chinese bots just didn't join and vote this year.
I can't hear you. Say it again, please.
I said maybe the Chinese bots didn't join and vote this year.
The Chinese bots, yeah, that's true.
The Chinese bots vote for Mike Glyer.
Hugos also.
I would like to point out that from the point of view of the college diversity committee that I was on, and that's a story I could tell someday, the exact term you're looking for really is Latino/Latina, Chicano, Hispanic. If you do not include Latino, Latina, Chicano, and Hispanic when you're naming a person of Latin descent who lives on North or South America, then you are engaging in the grossest sort of racism, and you should be ashamed of yourselves.
I think person of Latin descent is a lot easier to use. Maybe we should stick with that.
What's wrong with the word Spaniard or Portuguese or
I think
we don't
that
wanna-
they're
we don't wanna
also
limit these to
including
national
people descended
borders.
from South Americans who are not
But
of Western descent.
But what we are ignoring completely is that we have a Latino, Chicano, Hispanic right here on the show who's been nominated for a Dragon Award.
That's right.
Whoa, I'm so diverse. I'm so diverse I can't even take it. And we had one for the Hugos too, because it turns out P. Alexander of Kursova is also one of us, and so I've got this nice trend now where all of our team here is weaponizing our diversity against this group on Twitter, and you know it's triggering the heck out of these people. It's great.
You guys are so funny. But I think that is a wonderful moment to move from these crazy subjects into talking about the Dragon Awards.
Yay!
Almost like I planned it that way.
Good work.
Indeed.
Let me mention
So
before anyone.
the big news with
Let
the
me
Dragon
mention-
Awards this week is that fans voted across the board, people of all different groups, but the authors decided to drop out, making it more of the actual science fiction fantasy and less of the cultural stuff.
Oh,
Great.
I have noticed a number of people were quite annoyed at Scalzi dropping out and then being allowed to come back in, and a couple of the other authors being allowed to pull out after initially being told, no, bugger off, you got voted for, you're in, you can't drop out. I actually really liked the suggestion, which amounted to, if you want to drop out, that's fine, but you'll never be allowed to be voted for again. Think very carefully before you piss on your fans like this. I thought that would have definitely been the right way to go.
I think that's a great idea, because they could then just have a simple list of names on the side where they said, don't vote for these people. The big problem I see is that a fan award is supposed to be an award of the books that fans like. I was completely behind them when they said, let's not let anybody drop out. Well, it's not about you, the author. It's about your fans liking your books. And I really wish they had stuck with that. I mean, I understand why they might think it's better to let people pull out if they want to, but some authors who we will not even mention, because why give them extra press, by dropping out or trying to make it look less legitimate. And that's just slimy thing to do. It's a petty thing to do.
I think that from the point of view of sheerly managing a complex operation like collecting all these votes and every thousands, tens of thousands of votes, that the proper thing to do was to say, no, you cannot withdraw your nomination. If you wish to refuse the award, if you should so win it, then you can refuse the award. But right now, you can't drop out. It is just too complicated to manage and administer and reissue new ballots and revote and all of that. No, go away.
Yes. That's the way to handle it.
I agree. I would have gone with that too. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm sorry they didn't, but the problem, of course, is that they're new and nobody paid much attention to them last year, so this is all unexpected to them.
I on the other hand, would not have used the complexity as the excuse. I think it would just say no. Just say no. Say your fans voted you in. It's not about you. Get over yourself. But Corey,
they're using the excuse that it was yucky people that voted him in.
Well, I mean, I don't mind if they want to pull out. I just think actually saying to them, well, look, you're not welcome back if you want to pull out. That's fine. I'm pretty sure once one or two of them do and they discover that they're completely serious about this, no one else will, and some of them will start begging to come back.
The problem is you want the award to be an award for the most popular work. It's not an award for the most popular work among the candidates who haven't offended their fans. Writers offend fans all the time.
And the problem is, let's say they do that, and a certain number of people drop out. And 10 years from now, the situation is different. The mood is different. One of the authors who dropped out a previous time now has a best-selling book. The fans really want to get that book on there. And if the Dragon Awards don't let them do it, then they look like they're just already turning themselves into something that's not the top books, you know? So I'm not sure that it's a good idea. But what about 5 years? You pull out, you can't come back for 5 years.
You just ban them for next year or the next 2 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. If there was some consequence, I think that would be nice. But it maybe not eternally. Maybe just 2 years or 5 years or something like that.
I will say, in Dragon Con's defense and the Dragon Award organizers' defense, this is the second year they've organized it. They're allowed to make some mistakes.
Oh, sure. And they're saying that, too. I don't think they realize that, usually you tell the authors ahead of time. Who knows that except for the authors who had been received? It was unlike the Hugos publicized that they did that. It was actually kept quite private. So the Dragon Award guys might not even have known that you normally let the guys decide ahead of time if they want to drop out or not, because then it's not a scene. They don't get any publicity for doing it ahead of time. They might then go and be rude and tell people they did it, but it's less dramatic and it's certainly less painful for Dragon Con.
This is true. Oh, everybody, Corey's turned up. Corey, if you want to introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, I'm Corey McCleary. Can you guys hear me all right? Am I coming through? I'm on hotel Wi-Fi now. I just got into a vacation spot, so yay. Nice. Fortunately for you guys, I'm not on the beach because it's miserable outside. Intermittent raining, and apparently there's supposed to be more thunder later. Yay. Anyway, I'm Corey McCleary. I'm a columnist for Superversive SF, and I'm also going to be one of the authors in Astounding Frontiers, my science fantasy, epic blaster fantasies, I think what I called it. Serial should be coming out soon.
Yes,
and
it's finished and uploaded.
Yeah, and it's my only qualifications for this is I've read 2 of the inaugural Dragon Award winning books and have the 3rd with me here. And yeah, that's me.
Well, since the Dragon Award is a fan-based award, there are no qualifications except showing up.
That's
one
true.
of the things.
It's not like
one of the things
we have to
I will say
of
though,
a certain racial or ethnic group in order to win the award.
One of the things I like about the.
Oh.
Yep.
I was going to say, I will say though, John C. Wright's Dragon Award winning novel Some Wither was my first introduction to the body of John C. Wright's work.
That's a very weird place to start.
It was.
That was my second book of his I read.
fun, dramatic, but weird. What I was going to say about the Dragon Awards is, I mean, while I think I have very little chance of winning against, or even John has against Rick Riordan, I was really glad that it was an award where, because they had like 7 people on their lists, you could get both big or small authors up against each other. And while on one hand, and Riordan's not the only author on there that John and I are up against who has a pretty big following. I was once up for a Best of the Year award, and I was up against the third, or I think it was the third, might have been the fourth Game of Thrones book. And so I threw up my hands and said, okay, there's no way I'm winning this. But I actually won that award. It was like a March Madness. We had, 64 and then 32 and stuff. I came in tied with one other lady. And one of the reasons was that the big authors, like Butcher and Martin, they didn't bother telling their fans about this little tiny award being given by some website somewhere. So, any of us smaller authors who merely said, hey, look, this is going on, actually did quite well. And I'm wondering about the Dragon Awards at the moment. I think some of the smaller authors still have a chance for the same reason, which is it's still not that well known. And, if we get the word out to fans who like our books, we still have a pretty good chance against bigger people because not everyone's voting. I do think that this will be less and less over time, that more and more, the more that the 70,000 people at DragonCon hear about the award, the less that the smaller people will have a chance of winning.
Yeah, there's a couple years left.
That's a good thing because we want it to be fan-driven. And B, they have so many nomination spots that I bet you a few smaller authors will continue to get on the ballot. And the DragonCon people say exactly what I've often thought, which is, hey, one of the main reasons we're doing this is to give you guys a suggested reading list. So they're going to be posting it in such ways that you can see whoever gets nominated, years from now, you could probably go back and still see those lists because they want to make available, hey, here's books that fans think are good for other fans to know about. So it's really quite an honor and quite a wonderful thing to get onto this list. And I'm very grateful to John Del Rose for his Team Chachi versus Team JCW campaign, which I'm pretty sure is what got me
No
on
one
the
can make out
ballot.
what you're saying. No one can make out what you're saying when you're laughing.
Sorry, I'm grateful to John
Del
Rose for his Team Chachi versus Team JCW campaign, which I'm pretty sure is what got me on the ballot.
Oh,
which team were you on?
P. Alexander is listening incidentally and said he made an interesting observation. Imagine if the Razzies allowed people to decline nominations.
Ooh.
Which is fair. Anyway.
Well, then again, I don't think the Razzies are awarded so much as inflicted upon movies, and justly so.
It's sad that the Hugos have become exactly that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We're not. You don't have to be sad anymore, guys, because Happy Frogs are winners.
That's true.
But
Except
for Boston, Ghostbusters didn't win.
I want to say this though, specifically about the Razzies. In contrast to the extreme lack of graciousness shown by the people who tried to withdraw from the Dragons, there are a number of people who won Razzie Awards who were classy enough to show up and accept them in person. Halle Berry showed up and gave a speech and accepted it. David Shapiro, the writer for Battlefield Earth, showed up. Paul Verhoeven showed up for Showgirls. Brian Helgen showed up for The Postman. Tom Green showed up. Tom Selleck showed up to accept a Razzie. Michael Ferris, Bill Cosby for Leonard Part 6, Sandra Bullock for All About Steve. All of these people had enough class that when they were nominated for a Razzie, they showed up in person at the awards ceremony to accept their award and give a little speech.
Wow.
That is really good. That is really sweet.
I now admire all these people. They've just gone up by one increment in my
one admire point.
That's really cool. One admire point, yeah.
John was talking about inflicting awards. David Hartwell, John's late editor at Tor, once told us that years ago, winning a Hugo meant a boost in sales, but that for the last 15 years or so, there was no boost in sales for getting nominated or winning a Hugo, and that winning the World Fantasy Award, and he was quite sad about this because he started that award and he loved it. Winning the World Fantasy Award actually would produce a drop in sales.
For that, if you can't hear her over the laughter, she said drop in sales.
Yikes.
Sorry. Laughter induced injury here. Drop in sales. He didn't know why. It just was something that happened.
My beautiful and talented wife and I are both up for the same award in the same category. I think that it's our duty to tell our fans that she wanted to drop out, but the Dragon Award Committee would not let her because she, lacks class, and I'm ashamed of her for that. And that she wants to, if she wins the award, she promises to give it to me no matter what. So you have to vote for me anyway. Now, I myself already have an award, okay? It's a beautiful looking thing. Each one of these things, I think before we say anything else, each one of these awards is unique because the way they make it, it looks like a frozen drop of fire, okay? And it's each one is
blown glass.
Yeah, but each one is going to look slightly differently because the process puts the colors and the highlights in different places, and it's a nice hefty award. As someone who's the thing is gorgeous, the thing is well done, the thing deserves our respect.
John is being,
I believe,
funny about it, but I'd like to actually say, I encourage, some people have said to me, I really want to vote for your book. And I say, follow your heart. But other people have said, I'm really torn between the Rachel Griffin book and the Swan Knight Sun because, I really like both series. And I say to all those people, vote for John, because I think his book, which is book one in a series that has really good ideas in it for boys, which is a little rare in YA fiction, has a better chance of winning if either of us are going to win. So, if you're torn, vote for John. And if you want me to get an award, vote for Brian Niemeyer, because he has promised that since he has a Dragon Award, that if he wins, he will give me, his editor, the award to put on my shelf next to John's. So a vote for John rather than me, but vote for Brian for me.
Well, I'm going to be voting for Brian Niemeyer's stuff, even though I haven't even read that book. I'm on book 2, and it's brilliant enough. I'm like, yeah.
Well, if you read the series,
I don't think book 3 is going to be a train wreck.
One of Brian's problems was that Soul Dancer and Secret Kings came out in the same year. So I think they were both available, or both counted or something. It worked out strangely with the way that the Dragons does the awards. So I really think if you liked either Soul Dancer or Secret Kings, you can vote for Secret Kings. But I must say, I actually thought Secret Kings was the best of the three as far as the actual storytelling. Though the first one I think had some weirderness in it that was cool. But I really liked Secret Kings. I liked them all, but I like Secret Kings the most. I think it was nice that one got up for the award.
Yeah. I'm getting trolled on my Facebook right now, actually, by somebody who's saying that Scalzi's just being noble and this mean Niemeyer is just attacking Scalzi. It's like, this person has not followed the last 5 years at all. It's like, who are you? And he's saying it's a very, very noble that Scalzi says vote for the book that's the best book, and Niemeyer just wants to do politics. So I just put, here's the sign-up award. A vote for me is a vote for America. Please vote.
Incidentally, I'm surprised after Scalzi withdrew that he didn't just stay withdrawn. I can't see the Dragon Awards being any sort of I can't see the Dragon Awards being any advantage to him at all. If he wins, everyone goes, yeah, well, it's John Scalzi. He's got a large fan base. Of course he was going to win, whatever. But if he loses to Brian or someone, he's never going to hear the end of it. The awards just all suck for him at this point.
And maybe they just convinced him with their argument about, we're trying to make it be fan-based. And, maybe he just thought, okay,
I strongly suspect that somebody talked to him and said, "Look, we've got a lot of people who are coming in to vote, so you're going to win."
That could be, or it could just be that they said, you know, you got nominated by people who really like you. They've already voted for you. We have to redo the system if we take you out. There would be a lot of, you know, and he might have just said okay when the other two people didn't.
The only reason Scalzi does anything in public is to make himself.
He might have said okay, I'll stay, before he found out the other two were actually dropping out, if you know what I mean. And at that point, it looks stupid if he changes his mind again. That's my guess.
You both talked over each other, and I didn't hear what either of you said.
Sorry, I'll say it quickly, then I'll let him talk. I said that he might have agreed to stay when they first said that they were going to not let people out, and then only later found out that the others dropped out once they changed their mind. And by the time he had agreed to change his mind, he looks stupid if he changes it again.
And what was your comment, Daddy Warpig?
Oh, Scalzi, the only reason why Scalzi does anything in public is to make himself look good, primarily to the cult. That's it. That's his entire motivation, is to make himself look good to the cult.
I killed the conversation.
Well, I just hope everyone will vote for Brian Niemeyer. Is that the category we're talking about?
The best science fiction.
Yeah, well,
I'd
like to see Brian win.
I don't want to see Scalzi win, not because of, even if his book is the best book this year, because he's already got as many Hugo Awards as Bob Heinlein got in his whole life, and he collected those in the last 10 years.
Yeah, but I think people should vote for the book they actually like the best. Otherwise, an award is pointless. So if people liked his book, they should vote for it. If they didn't like it best, they should vote for one of the others. Doesn't matter how many.
I don't want the Dragon Awards to go the way of the Hugo Awards, you know.
Yeah, but if his actually was the best, then they should vote for it. If it isn't, they shouldn't.
By all accounts, it's terrible. I haven't read it. I didn't want to give him money. I don't buy John Scalzi's books anymore. I used to enjoy his stuff, but since I discovered he hates people like me, I don't want to give money to him. So
I'm not going to poop on somebody else's books. I kind of agree with this.
Old Man's War was good. His first book was pretty good. I liked it.
Oh, I used to read a bunch of his. It's just like there's lots of books to read, and I don't have infinite money or infinite time to read them. So if if I'm giving money to authors, I don't want to give it to authors who hate me. So I don't read his stuff anymore, which is sad, but you know, whatever.
Plus, his book, for me, I never got into him because his book came out around the time earlier on when I was just really reading fantasy. And when I actually heard about Scalzi, it was because I heard about Old Men's War. I didn't really follow authors at that point, and like, maybe later. Then I heard about who John Scalzi was, and I'm like, it'll probably color my perceptions too much for me to actually just enjoy something. So I kind of passed. And
well, I'm a firm believer in the theory that the author is only the donkey carrying the muse along, and so that even if you dislike the author intensely, his muse might be just as the most beautiful thing ever. So that's why I also think authors shouldn't take too much credit for the work they do. They should take credit for the discipline of sitting down to write it, but the ideas and the story itself, I think, comes from heaven. I don't think it comes out of the author's brain. Because that's the way I write.
Right.
So
yeah, I've also got way too much on my reading list.
Who is a pagan? Myself. Or Milton, who's a Puritan. You know, I don't have to agree with people to like their work. Mm-hmm. And since I'm an obnoxious guy myself, I hope my readers feel that way about me. Because otherwise, I don't stand a chance. I'm not winning any popularity contest based on my personality. I assure you of that.
Yeah. But I will say this in favor of the Dragons that I like over the Hugos, because I just found out apparently the Hugos were yesterday.
Yeah.
Heard nothing about it till it was all over. But I like the fact that they have different like genre categories.
Yes, I like that too.
Because the only thing I think was new with the Hugos is they added a series category, like best series,
which
and
is good.
Yeah, but if you're lumping weird fantasy, epic fantasy, military SF, space opera, horror, all of that into one genre, you're going to get a very, very.
You're bringing up a really good point,
You're forgetting
Corey.
You're forgetting the age of the award, though. That was
Well,
the award that
when
started
the
back
Hugos
when there was
came
only
about,
there was only one genre, which is science fiction, and even fantasy had to pretend to be science fiction to get written. That's what Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders was.
Well, not only that, but
after the 80s and 90s, it exploded into many subgenres, which now need their own categories.
Right.
Short stories used to be the main type of fiction read, and while they're making a little bit of a comeback, for the most part, novels is the main type of fiction read now. So the Hugos, which only allowed one novel out of all the ones published, but allowed 3 or 4 separate short story things. I think that having different categories by subject is really good. Now, the problem I think they're running into, though, still is, I wonder if they, I wonder about their length cutoff. I think there's still some fuzziness going on with what the lengths are that people are nominating and things like that. I wonder if they also need a short story group, or if they just need to say any length, science fiction of any length can be nominated.
I heard the editor of Kursova magazine kind of complaining about that with the Dragons, where they don't have any best science fiction or fantasy magazine or anything like that.
Anthology.
Right. And I see that could be maybe something that the Dragons could and probably should branch out into.
I think the reason they didn't do that is because they didn't want to look like the Hugos exactly. And honestly, I mean, these magazines and anthologies and short stories and all that, I mean, the circulation on those is that most people, probably don't really have a good informed opinion on most of that stuff as they would like novels.
It'd be nice to have an anthology category, though, because anthologies, are up there with books.
I would venture to say that even among the Hugos, doing almost 15 years, almost no one had read any of the short stories that were winning the awards. And I'm including myself. The stories I was nominated for, I think more people read them because it was nominated for the Hugo than actually read them in the original venue.
Absolutely.
Because back in the 40s and 50s, the short story magazine, Analog, and then later Isaac Asimov's Fantasy and Science Fiction, those were the main vehicles of science fiction. After Star Wars came out, and I say that Star Wars gets the credit for expanding our field. Science fiction became mainstream. Most people recognized science fiction references. Even people like on the political commentators talking about the great issue of the day will make references to Mordor or to how logical Mr. Spock is and so on. At that point, so I don't blame the Dragons for not having a short story category, even though I write short stories myself and would like to win awards for it.
Mm-hmm.
This may be orthogonal to the discussion, but I think it's nevertheless eliminative. The reason why short stories get short shrift is because starting in the 70s and 80s, the audience stopped reading them. And starting in the 80s and 90s, the audience stopped reading science fiction. And the reason why, interestingly enough, if you go back and look at what happened in those time periods, is the same thing that happened to Westerns. And I just found this out, by the way, so it's kind of new to me. The Western movie genre infamously imploded, but the reason why wasn't because the audience suddenly got sick of Westerns. It's because the Westerns they were making and showing in theaters suddenly changed. Starting with a director called Altman, they stopped making Westerns by and large and started making anti-Westerns. Westerns where the bad guys were the good guys and the good guys were the bad guys. Westerns that were about how awful America was because of Vietnam and so on and so forth. And so what had been a wholesome, patriotic, loved genre that produced movie after movie after movie, many of them great, legendary landmarks of cinema, the Western genre collapsed. It stopped being made for decades, except for one movie here and one movie there. The same exact thing happened with short fiction, and the same exact thing happened with science fiction, is what the people were making was not what the audience wanted, and so it died.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the thing is there are going to be the people who would want to read anti-westerns, and the thing is they're a very, very, very small contingent. It just happen to be very, very loud contingent, and as such, you're going to see the audience who's actually committed to Western, to actually enjoying, in this case, Westerns, just go somewhere else for that, or just stop. I had a chat with someone at my church the other day where he was talking about how, because I had mentioned I was reading Counter Trillion, and I was saying it's not something I'd normally read because it's hard science fiction. I'm more of a fantasy, and when I read science fiction, I like it nice and mushy. But he's like, yeah, I used to read science fiction and fantasy stuff too, and then I kind of just stopped because it all started to not be so good. I'm like, yeah, I've heard about that, and we kind of had a talk about some of that stuff, and I was actually going back and reading some of the stuff he was talking about, like E.E. Smith and the Elric books.
Yep. Which are good.
Mm-hmm. Dark, but ridiculously imaginative by today's standards. The final battles of Stormbringers, I mean, you don't see that in... The big battles nowadays are things that almost strictly adhere to the way it was done in medieval times, which works for some things, but in this, you're having a guy go up against gods and winning.
It's Diomedes level warfare. Yeah, I noticed that Elric doesn't have any great feathery bottoms in its anywhere in so forth, so it's rather old fashioned. You came in late. Great feathery bottoms is now our new slogan for the Hugo Awards.
Yeah, it's from a story that won one of the Hugos.
But if you've read Dr. E. Smith, you don't actually have to read.
Is that a bug about Elric or a feature?
What the?
That is good, even if it's dark.
Yeah, I
call
that a feature.
Michael Moorcock is the prime example of why I don't think you need to like the author to like his work. Michael Moorcock is like some sort of anarchist, communist, freakazoid, who single-handedly tries to ruin science fiction with his new wave idea of making it more literary and making it less fun. But his works are really imaginative. He even wrote an Edgar Rice Burroughs ripoff that was, perfectly cromulent sword and planet story.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I disagree with the politics of the author, and I disagree with some of the philosophical things that he's kind of assumed in his thing. But the stories were fun, and that's the key. They're fun, they're imaginative, and you don't see that nowadays, and that's kind of sad. Because
I think a lot of writers forget what they're being paid for. We're being paid to entertain. We're not being paid to lecture you about politics. That's what.
Well, it's not just that, but the people who are the people who don't mistake themselves for pundits and think of themselves as entertainers. There are some kind of hidden, unspoken rules. Some people think with things like fantasy and science fiction, that if you go back and read Appendix N, I don't think anyone could think up 9 Princes in Amber. I don't think anyone could think up a Princess of Mars nowadays, because one of the issues that the Pulp Revolution is addressing is the idea of not being shackled by genres. Sometimes I'll write a book that's just playing a genre straight. Sometimes I'll do just a straight up fantasy or a straight up science fiction thing. But you never have to feel, oh, I'm writing a space opera, I can't put this in.
John has talked a number of times about his experience when he started watching Hindu movies. And I can tell you Chinese movies are sometimes the same. And they don't have this, at least the older ones, they didn't have this genre concept. So you'd be going along in a comedy and suddenly there'd be a ghost, and then there'd be a tragic moment, and then there'd be some high drama. And they didn't put it all in little nice categories like it tends to be in the West. They just threw it together to make an interesting story.
Yeah, I have kind of noticed some.
When you read Shakespeare, is Macbeth a fantasy? There's witches in it. Is Midsummer Night's Dream a fantasy story? It doesn't read like a fantasy story; it just reads like a story. Also, I've noticed when I had kids and I read a bunch of children's stories to them, children's stories don't pay attention to those artificial genre demarcations. If they want to have a magical talking cat and a time traveler in the same story, they just do it. And I would say superhero comics are the same way. They don't care about genre.
Nowadays, however, they have to be just as preachy, unfortunately. But that's
not a genre. That's just a disease. That's just something that happens to the.
I will actually say on the trip,
God and has to find an idol to worship.
On the trip down here, I was actually watching something. After you recommended it, you mentioned it on the Space Opera live stream, and Josh Young mentioned it before, which was I downloaded the first few episodes off of Netflix of Gurren Lagann. What have you done?
What genre is that? I think it's in the same genre as Somewither myself.
It's bizarre, but I feel like the thing is they're not like, okay, we're gonna adhere to these genre rules. They're gonna do, okay, what's more awesome? Okay, figure out a way to make that even more awesome, and then do that a few more times.
Yeah,
it's bizarre, but I can't help it. It's fun. That's the thing.
Wait until you get in the second half. While I'm making recommendations, also look at My Hero Academia, and if you're in a girly mood, look at Little Witch Academia. Both of those are anime I strongly recommend.
Yeah. I've just had way too much time. I have way too much stuff to do, so this is like what I'm doing for vacation.
They're both more American than anything made in America these days.
Yeah, that's sad. But yeah,
I will definitely. I think the time to be sad is done. I think it's turning around. I think the major publishers in New York are no longer the major publishers. I think the independents are no longer independents. We're science fiction. I think that the Hugo Awards have gone the way of.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I want to make a comment in a slightly different direction that related. So I took last week off because I went on vacation, and vacation involved coordinating 14 people. So John said when I came home, I could goof off for a week. So what I did was read, and I mainly read books that have come out from small publishers or self-published. Things that I was involved with in some way, or that someone had asked me to read. And they were all bad. It was shockingly bad, and not in a way that no book ever was back when there were gatekeepers. The story ideas were not bad. The plot ideas were not bad. They could have been really good, but they were just not edited. So they all had new writers' errors in them that no book when I'd ever seen in my whole childhood and youth growing up ever had, because editors corrected these things. And one thing that worries me about this is, okay, well, we have this wonderful new chance to get all these books out there, but if so many things that are coming out independently are being presented so badly put together, that tends to turn people off of reading independent small press books. So I think that's just something, I'm not sure what to do about it, but it's an interesting kind of a force in the opposite direction.
That was something. I'm on the Discord channel for a lot of the Pulp Rev guys, and one of the guys there had come up with a term for these books that can get published, but really they were what the gatekeepers were there to kind of stop, in the sense of, this is cool ideas, but the quality it needs lots of editing, or it needs or sometimes it just needs to be junk.
But something was missing.
Yeah, he called them slush goblins. And he's trying to figure out ways to figure out how to find them and either help the author or tell them, wait a bit, because that's what one of the other guys on there said, something along the lines of, people are putting out, there's usually an axiom I've heard in writers where either you have to write 1 million words or you have to write an entire novel. And I think before you get published, and most people are putting up that entire novel that never gets published, that probably doesn't deserve to, because that's when the author's working out all the kinks and they're working out all the different, figuring out how to play story, how to plot something, how to construct that. That's where they're working it out. That's their sandbox before they move on to a big building.
Whose works I was reading, this is not their first book, which means that certain writing errors that could have been corrected, they're not even aware they're doing. And I'm talking about errors like absolute lack of what animation calls anticipation. Sarah Hoyt wrote a really good article on this very subject recently, where she said how her first books got turned down for having no plot, even though she had plotted them very carefully. And the problem wasn't no plot. The problem was that she didn't use judicious foreshadowing. In a fairy tale, you are told you need to go get the rose, climb the hill, smash the pumpkin. And then as the story goes on, if the character manages to get the rose, climb the hill, and smash the pumpkin, you, the reader, know that the story is progressing, and you have some ability to anticipate whether or not it's going to be possible to climb the hill or smash the pumpkin. Yeah, but if the author does not know to put in those little clues, the story reads like a dream, stream of consciousness. Anything could be happening at any moment. What tiny things that one editor could just tell a writer to do, but nobody's telling these writers they need these things.
One of the best examples. So one of the best examples of correctly done anticipation in a story I've ever seen is in J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. In the first paragraph, it mentions the wealth and prosperity of the aging Bilbo Baggins, who seems to still be young and seems to still be very wealthy. And the old gaffers shake their heads and say, it's not natural, nothing good will come of it. Well, of course, the reason why he's still young is because he's got the evil magic ring on his finger, and that thread leads you all the way to Rivendell and across the continent down into the fiery mountain of doom, which takes you 3 books to get there. But everything is set up from the very beginning.
But not only is it that thread.
But if you write a story where kryptonite is introduced in chapter 4 and then used against Superman in chapter 4, that's no good. You have to have Superman in chapter 1, find out that kryptonite hurts him in chapter 2, and then later have it used against him, so that there's enough pacing for the reader to see it coming.
Screenwriters call that laying a pipe, where you put elements in earlier scenes that will pay off in later scenes. But
set up and follow through. It's like telling a joke. You have to have a straight line and a punchline.
If I could move on beyond describing the problem, I want to say a couple things real quick. If you're an indie writer, then what you really need to do is pay money for an editor, an actual editor, not just a line editor, not just a proofreader, an actual editor to come along and help you with. And the other thing that you ought to do is network and try, if you can, to find a mentor. Try, if you can, to find someone who has the time and the drive, who knows what they're talking about, who can read your stuff and tell you where you're making mistakes like this, basic mistakes, and how to fix it, and also read writing blogs about how to write and try to apply them to your work. Secondly, when you're talking about all of these books will hurt indie as a brand. The fact of the matter is, if you are an independent author, if you are publishing primarily through Amazon, then what you need to do is not use indie as your brand and not use a movement as your brand. You yourself are your brand, so that when they think about your name in a book, they're not thinking, oh, he's an indie author. They're thinking, oh, yeah, that guy, I love his book. Make your book the very best you can. Become your own brand, because that's what you're selling the audience. That is what the audience is going to be buying, is stories from you. And the last thing I want to say is indie writers need to up their game. You are competing on a level playing field with the big five. And you can say, well, that doesn't make any sense. The big five, they've got billions of dollars that they can spend on advertising. Yeah, they may have billions of dollars to spend on advertising, but they're not. They're not advertising fantasy and science fiction. They're advertising the bigger name authors who lose money. They're advertising the $20 million they give to some politician who will never earn that back. You are competing in Amazon. You are competing on an even field with every other author out there. And if you want to compete with every other author out there, you need to up your game. You need to buy a good-looking cover. Look how big of an advantage a great cover has been for John De La Rosa's book, and he's on the stream right now. He can tell you about that when I'm done ranting. You need to buy a good book. You need to buy an editor to come in and tell you how to present your story, how to structure your story, how to set things up at the beginning so you can pay off in the end, how to combine elements, combine characters that need to be combined, how to split characters or elements that need to be split. You need to pay someone to come in and do proofreading. It's an investment of money, but if you're worth it as a writer, you will make your book better. Good cover, good writing, a minimum of graphic design on your ebook so it doesn't look awful when people read it. You need to up your game, because if you can outcompete the majors, if you can outcompete these lazy behemoths who are pissing money away on authors that will never earn it back, if you can outcompete them, you can build an audience and you can make an impact. Look at what Nick Cole and Jason Anspach have done recently with their Galaxy's Edge books. They got up into, I believe, the top 20 of all books on Amazon, or top 100 books on Amazon, and they're independent authors. They're making money and they're selling books, and you can do that if you choose to compete on that level. Only publish stuff that is good enough to build your brand, and make sure when you publish it that is presented the absolute best you can, because otherwise you're just hurting your career. It is not enough to get published. You want to publish great works so that you can build an audience, so that you can build a career, so that whatever level of success you're aiming at, if you're aiming at beer money every month, or you're aiming at paying a bill every month, or you're aiming at buying a new car every year, whatever level of success you're aiming at, you can hit it if you're willing to do the work.
Two comments related to that. One is, I talked today to a professional editor who's been a professional editor my whole life, and he said that there's a lot of really unscrupulous editors out there who charge these independent writers money and then give them really bad results. And he said he wasn't even talking about like theme and character. They don't even give them good grammar and spelling results, and he's finding it hard to get people to come and pay him for his excellent work. And I know he's an excellent editor because he edits some of my stuff. He's finding it hard for people to pay because they've been burned by people who are not doing a good job. So I was thinking, you know, it should be something like Predators and Editors list for editors, where, you know, if people could find out at least that someone else thought they did well, or that a book they edited actually made money. The second thing is that some covers that are not good are doing so well that Vox actually wanted to redo John's book with covers that were crappier on purpose to make them look like a certain group of books that were selling. And that, I think, is really sad. I love really good covers, and I think they are really important. And it's kind of sad that so many people are putting out books with really cheap covers, that in some cases that's what readers are looking for, because the book they liked had a cover like that. And it's one of those weird things that happens that I suspect is kind of temporary.
Dawn and I, among others, are writing an entire, I don't know what we're doing with that, but we just started spitballing an idea, and it terrifies me. Dawn, do you know what I speak of?
The amputee romance.
Yes. Because we were complaining about that. If you
are
look
we
at
running with this idea, are we? Sorry, I remember joking
Yeah.
about this and saying we see the
at this point,
romance
we have
novel with a torso on the cover, so let's just do one where the character is a torso with two arms.
Story, the
He's a strong, silent type. The jokes write themselves.
Yeah.
I remember a book about a girl involved with the Spanish Inquisition who had no arms from years and years ago.
I don't think what you're getting. This guy doesn't have a head or anything below his torso. He's literally just the torso.
And the idea comes from
it's salacious
the idea
romance
comes
covers.
from the top 10 Amazon romance covers. All of them are shirtless guys that have no heads, no legs, and occasionally maybe have an arm or maybe both arms, but that's all you see is just a bare chest.
So this is one of those
every
guys
single
who, when
cover.
he's in the pool, his name is Bob, and when he's in front of a house, his name is Matt.
Yes. Well, he's gonna have arms because they have arms, but no head, no head and no legs. So he's the strong, silent type that's a good listener and doesn't walk away.
That is tremendously funny.
So,
But you're right that he's on every cover of the modern ones. That's what's odd is no face.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was actually mentioning this. I was talking to Jaji about this, where if you look at the Wheel of Time, I know a lot of people like to hate on the Wheel of Time, but if you look at, I'm collecting the trade paper, because I love the Wheel of Time. I'm collecting the trade paperback versions of that, which are the bigger, they're like 6x9 covers, and they have actual artwork that doesn't look like it's done by crayon by a guy who used to do like hair metal band album covers. So it looks like a Tolkien knockoff from the 70s.
Aren't those the
original
ones put out by
the Wheel of Time.
Farscape or whatever that is? I think those are the young adult versions, and of course, the ones that are selling younger people, they used to put pictures on.
No, if you look at
Real
the Eye of
pictures.
the World. Well, here's the thing. If you look at the Eye of the World and the Great Hunt, the main character, Randall Thor, is like a 16-year-old farm boy with red hair. The picture of him in the first book makes him look like a 40-year-old brunette guy. And then the second one makes him look like 12. it like these covers are, and they just look like they're done in like, they start out okay for the first like 4, and then they start looking like they're done in crayon. And I know I learned that the guy who illustrated them, Daryl K. Sweet, had died because I picked up A Memory of Light, the 14th book in the series. I'm like, this cover doesn't actually suck. And I read the book, and the scene from the cover was actually in the book for once. And I'm like, hold on.
At one point, Daryl K. Sweet was one of the biggest artists in the field, but that was many, many years ago.
Yeah, he was up till Towers of Midnight, which I think came out in 2011. He was in charge of this, and I saw what he was going to do for A Memory of Light, and I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but I'm glad that they went with someone else's stuff. Yeah, it's a good cover is definitely a good investment. It's what the people say, don't judge a book by their cover. Everyone does, because I was actually dissuaded from picking up The Wheel of Time because, this looks like a Tolkien ripoff. Like it's done in that kind of
itself that way, and then went in a different direction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's that's the thing. It looked like the covers will oftentimes give you many preconceived notions about that, but there's definitely something to say about getting a good artist to do it. And honestly, what I'd say is go on art sites like DeviantArt's the one that comes to mind. I think that and if you can't draw it yourself, find someone who can. You're investing in creating a product. It's a single investment that you're going to have to make, and that's part of the thing is to indie authors out there. Don't think of this as because I'm actually studying economics and I'm studying marketing and stuff. Don't think of this as I'm an artist creating great art. Think of this as I'm creating a product. So what do I have to spend on creating that product?
Let me chime in to emphasize that point. One of the most professional artists I ever heard of was something said by Hugh Lofting, who was the guy who, for you young whippersnappers, wrote the Dr. Dolittle books. And Dr. Dolittle went on to like 10 or 12 books in the series, children's books. And he said, I crafted and worked on my
I'm not hearing you anymore.
You cut out just as we're about to start.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah, we can't hear you. You were in the middle of talking.
We missed the entire quote. And now you're silent.
Nope. Can't hear you.
Yeah. Faulty
Looks like his
connection.
mic stopped again.
Well, let's continue. If he comes back on, we can hear what he had to say.
Yeah. But that is one of the things, because you see a lot of indie works on the Dragon Awards, to kind of get back on topic. And if you want to be able to get on those awards, if you want to be able to get, if you want to be able to compete with like Rick, not compete maybe, but just be on the same award as Rick Riordan, you're going to have to be professional. And part of being professional is knowing, okay, I can't do this. I'm going to have to hire someone else.
One of the things I was just talking about the subject with John, and after reading all these books, and I said, you know,
How about now?
about 10 years, when I had a lot of writing friends who were selling books through small press, and
Hello, can you
I
hear me?
had made the decision to try to get into Tor, and I wasn't going to go small press. And for a while,
Hello, can you
I'd been
hear me?
wondering, you know, did I make a mistake? Should have
Hello,
I
hello.
gone small press all that time? Look what happened with
Yeah,
Tor.
we can hear you, John.
But then I realized, I think we can hear you now, John, but let me just finish and I'll hand it back over to you. Then I realized that all those years of rewriting my book to be qualified to get into one of the big five, was a slightly different number back then, but made it so I ended up being a much better writer, because I had to keep upping my game in order to make the cut. And I'm not saying that everybody should have to wait that long, but I do think that I'm grateful that I had that experience, because I may be making mistakes I don't see yet, but there's certain mistakes I now know I'm not making because I've learned how not to do those things, partially because I had a good editor, partially because I just kept trying. And I wish there was a way to, I don't know, let more of these authors know, you know, that their books could be really good if they could just make the small changes they need to make.
Mm-hmm.
John, you back?
Yes, I am. All I was going to say is Hugh Lofting once said that he writes stories the way a cobbler makes shoes, by which he means he approaches the matter in a workmanlike and realistic fashion, looking at the materials he has, you know, the shape of the foot of his customer, and you can make a shoe in an artistic fashion and make it different from other shoes, but it still has to perform certain basic functions and be a certain basic shape. So the in his typical English realism, he did not indulge in this belief that artistic, divine inspiration cures all problems and excuses you from all effort.
Mm-hmm.
And people like the new wave authors in the 60s and other the kinds of authors who pen literary manifestos rather than penning novels are the kinds who did not approach their work in a workmanlike fashion. So I was not saying anything new. I was just
I tried reading a literary book.
Voting Corey. I was just supporting Corey's comment.
So
oh, you go.
Let me reiterate. Jedge was just saying that she wishes there were a way that she could let authors know what's happening. From the author's side, the people who are not producing, who are wanting to be published independently, which is fine. This is the perfect time to do it. There is a sea change in publishing. The big five are collapsing. Opportunities are opening up in independent publishing. If you want to start publishing independently, the time is now. It will be too late in 5 years. There is a huge opportunity for people who can start publishing now, but work on your craft, make better stories, and above all, make friends among established authors and see if you can find a mentor, someone who's willing to sit down and tell you what you're doing wrong, or if not, pay for an editor to edit your book who is a good editor, who will give you good feedback, who will sit down and tell you what you're doing wrong. There are a lot of writers out there who also do editing as a job. Find some of them. Brian Niemeyer does. L. Jadji Lamplighter on this show does. Find someone, pay them to edit your book. It is worth more. You've got to look at it this way. You say, well, yeah, but that's too much money for this one book. I'm not going to sell that much. You are not just investing money in this one book. You are investing money in learning techniques and correcting errors that will stand you in good stead for every other book you make in your career. You are investing in the future when you get a good editor for your first books. You've got to look at it that way because you're not selling one book, you're building a career, and you have to look at the long term. So if you're a writer, find people who are editing. If they are willing to mentor you, great. You are very, very fortunate. If you can't find someone like that, pay someone to edit your work so that you can learn your craft better from someone who knows what they're doing. Secondly, if you're an author and you want to help independent authors do better, make it known that you're available. I'm not saying you should, spend time every week to help 10 people along who aren't going to listen or who aren't going to do stuff. But if you know someone who's a beginning writer, a novice writer, and they're willing to listen to your advice, read their book, give them advice. If they are willing to listen to absolutely cold-hearted, realistic, helpful advice, and you're their friend and you want to spend the time, by all means do so. Or if you want to start editing for money, by all means do so. And if you're an author and people are giving you advice, they're telling you where you're screwing up, be humble, accept their advice. You may not do what they say, you may not make the exact changes they want, but by all means, don't get defensive, don't get your feelings hurt. Listen to when people tell you you're screwing up, and try and understand why, and try to make good choices. This is a career. You have to learn it, you have to work at it, you have to better yourself, and you can't get emotional about every single thing.
I burst into applause, but I don't think my microphone can pick that up. Kind of weird.
Hey, what about, since we don't have all that much time left, what about a little bit about the John De La Rose, you want to start by saying a little about your book that's up?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute there. Yep.
Judge, can we do something on
I just wondering if
topic?
you want to say a bit about your Dragon Award nominated book.
Yeah, probably should have done this at the beginning, but so my book is Star Realms Rescue Run. It is a military science fiction which has been described to me by readers and Star Realms fans as Rogue One, only better, which is not that hard to do in theory, but it's a good version of Rogue One that has sort of that theme of a character going and having to break into an enemy installation, except for I added in the romance and the, positive things that make stories worthwhile. And I wrote it before Rogue One came out, so technically they copied me.
I'm sure they did, John. I'm sure they did.
Cool.
It's for best military science fiction.
Brian's book, Secret Kings, which is the third in his series, which I always think of somehow being a bit like if Roger Zelazny wrote 1001 Arabian Nights in Space. It's cool. It's a lot different than anything else, which I think is nice because it makes it quite, without it being like, just like the last thing you read.
Yeah, I've recommended Ethereal because I've finished it. I recommended that to some friends where they're like, I'm kind of sick of any fantasy or book being, just swords and castles and stuff. I'm like, okay, how about an Ethereal? It's like Space Pirates, except they go to hell, Dante's Inferno style. And there's crazier stuff than that there.
Space Pirates in Hell. The first book is Space Pirates in Hell, and that's even more reminds me of like, I don't know, Creatures of Light and Darkness or something. But the whole thing, the magic and the background and the way he does things and the odd way he uses the words for things just give it a very different feel. It's much more like the before Star Wars and before Tolkien ripoffs. And I think that it gives it, a charm of its own, not only because it's its own thing, but also because it just isn't the thing you read last time. It gives it its own world and feel and mood and to it, which is nice.
Tyler wants to say something. Hold on.
Hi.
Hi, Tyler.
Say it again. What do you want to say, Tyler?
Hello.
Hello,
Aww.
Tyler. This is our future audience.
Yeah, he just woke up, so
Appreciate you.
cue to exit. So thank you for having me on, guys, and I'll hopefully talk to all of you soon.
Yep.
And good luck.
Best of
Cheers.
luck.
Appreciate
I'll be voting for you.
See you.
And
So maybe, do we want to talk about the other books?
yeah, we probably should.
Dragon
So
Award.
my book that's up is Rachel and the Many-Splendored Dreamland, which is book 3, or I should say the third book of Unexpected Enlightenment. And I think I don't know if it's the best story I've written, but I think it's the best book technically I've written, in that I'm just getting better at things as I go along. So I, corrected errors that I might have made in earlier books. And it's a fun story that opens up with a girl falling out of Dreamland onto her butt. I noticed now that I've read quite a bit of modern YA that none of it has any humor in it. It's all very serious and very much like the old-fashioned Gothics. And my book is completely unlike that. It's much more like Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson stuff, or Buffy, in that there's a mix of serious and funny things going on at the same time. But this one has both very wondrous fantasy, but also some more serious things going on in it too. John, you want to talk about yours? John, you there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you
You
hear
want
me?
to talk about Sunlight Sun?
Yes, I do want to talk about Sunlight Sun. I'm really honored to be nominated with it, and I'm very amused that I'm up against my wife, who's on Team Lamplighter. But I'm putting him into the impossible position of having to either withdraw my book so my wife can win, trying to win against Rick Riordan, which is also really difficult. But here's the advantage of the book. Here's what I like about the book. And this is forgive me if I'm praising my own work, but that's one of the drawbacks of living in a capitalist society. People have to obliviate themselves. This is a book about the virtues of honesty, temperance, and courage, and about kicking people's butts in a good cause. And that kind of thing is very rare these days. I can't recall any book certainly no kids book I've read in the last 20 years that actually told a teenage boy what he needed to do to be a man. I also can't remember that many books where the good guy was a baptized Christian, and none of the books about King Arthur that have come out recently actually showed knighthood and chivalry in a good light. And people tend to forget that these are military disciplines. They're not just a word that means you hold the door for a lady or tip your hat or something. So, and there's also a book about a talking dog. This is the kind of book which I think needs to get more attention, not just because I wrote it, not just because I like it, but also because I think the audience needs to know there's books like this out there. And if the Dragon Award manages to point the spotlight of publicity at the book, I'll be very pleased. That said, I've already got an award. I got one last year for Some Weather, which is a very different style and type of book. Ilya the Barbarian is not an admirable young man in terms of how chaste and
Marmoset
and clumsy he is.
Yeah,
yes, Ilya the Marmoset. He's more of a he's more of a comedy relief action figure, which I think of Jack Burton, but not as good.
I will say that I read Swan Night Sun and Swan Night Sun and Feast of Elves, and one of the things I will have to say that I really liked about it is it was a guy's story. I went through a while where I would read YA because I felt like that's the age I'm at. That's what I'm kind of supposed to read, and there are very few books that were geared to me. A lot of them were supposed to be this kind of spunky romance between the action chick and the bad boy, and at some point that just gets boring after a while. And I know a lot of guys who are readers end up not going into the YA section and just going from like juvenile fiction, which I kind of say is for kids up to like age 12 to 13.
And it wasn't
right
that
to
way
adult fiction.
10 years ago, 15 years ago, YA had not been invested in, and it was the best stuff around because it was all sorts of stuff for everybody. And then it became really popular. It became all writing for girls, and now the good stuff tends to be in where you find Percy Jackson, just what you're talking about in the kids section.
Right, and there's not really something like that for guys. Like, I jumped into stuff geared for older audiences, not exactly in subject. Like, the stuff I was reading for the adult fiction I was reading was not adult in the sense that, you know, it's too obscene or anything, but it was of a higher technical level. But my parents got me to read very early, so I was always a bit more adept at reading than some of my peers. My teacher ended up giving me The War of the Worlds because she's like, these books aren't challenging you enough. Among other books, because she turns out I like that stuff. Yes, Mrs. Glenn Ryan, it's your fault that I've become a science fiction author.
I noticed reading kids' books to my kids that the ones written before I was a kid, the ones written in my dad's generation or my granddad's, reading Wizard of Oz, which was written about the turn of the last century. The grammar, spelling, and construction are all good. You know what I mean? I mean, the story construction is workmanlike, and nothing is, especially in L. Frank Baum, who set out to write an American-style fairy tale that didn't end in the grimness of the European fairy tales. You know, which some people, I admit, it's a matter of taste. If it's too much sweetness and light, they can't take it. But man, it was a relief to read a book to my little kids that I knew was not going to pull a sucker punch on me and end up in a gay marriage at the end or something. Or it's, by the way, won this year because it was a story about a princess who ends up in a gay marriage. It happened all the time in the Middle Ages. It was their main thing, in fact. Am I still on? Am I still live? I don't hear any reaction. Yep. Okay.
Nope, you're right. Definitely.
Oh, and let me say once again that
yes,
everyone
I'm just
should vote for Brian
eating,
Niemeyer. Everyone should vote for Brian Niemeyer's book because my wife deserves an award for her editing. She saved his book. I have no idea. I was not looking. I'm kidding. I was not looking over her shoulder. I do not know what she did or how she did it. It's magic. It's miraculous. And I also want to say, Daddy Warpig is right. Definitely hire a pro editor. Definitely get a good book cover. My book covers for Swan Night Sun, I thought were the one that just came out for the hardback shows this beautiful cover of the guy and his dog and the mermaid and the angel and stuff. The Swan Maiden. The cover's better than the book. I'm allowed to say that because I'm the author. And I believe that the Dragon Awards should actually get a group of real dragons, go to Iceland, and burn down the Hugos and their little plastic rocket ship statue. Because they betrayed. There's no rocket ships in any of their stories these days. It's just magical realism. The story is written by feminists about feminist topics.
Oh, well.
It's not even most women are interested in. I mean, how many women do you know are really interested in falling in love and marrying a girl?
I know we've got
in your circle. You know?
Nope, not me.
I know we've got to kick off.
I would say that probably women are probably more interested in the thing that was written by what I say is the woman with the most geek cred in all science fiction and fantasy fandom, which is The Empire Strikes Back by Leigh Brackett. I mean, is there anyone that literally wrote Star Wars?
Leigh Brackett was married to World Wrecker Hamilton, and one of my goals in life is to get a nickname as awesome as World Wrecker. That guy writes real science fiction, okay? If you don't blow up a planet, at least. But
we should also mention Declan's books. I believe Declan has 2 books up for the Dragon Award.
He does.
He does. Is it?
It's Codename Unsub and Live and Let Bite. I did both covers for those.
Yeah, so in 2 different categories, he's up.
Horror and apocalyptic.
He's not here to speak for himself, so I just want to say, that one of them, I believe, is his ongoing vampire series, which
that's Living That Bite is book 3.
Yeah,
that's up for Dragon.
By the way, Dawn, are you the one who drew the cover for Steam and Country?
No, I did not. No. That was by somebody with way more talent than I have.
Sean, I forget Sean's last name, but
Sean King.
There you go. Not that Sean King.
No, different Sean King.
He's
very talented. He's very talented.
From the different Sean King guy.
John has it on up as his screensaver.
It's my screensaver. I liked it so much.
Dawn, can you, having done the cover, can you just say a line or two about both of Declan's things so he gets represented?
Well, On Living That Bite is his 3rd book, and I was trying to think of which. I've read all of them, and I have a terrible memory, so remembering which book is which.
Yeah, I understand that.
This one actually has a female vampire who terrorizes them, and it has a lot to do with some plot with the UN.
I know he has interesting kind of philosophical, theological underpinnings to his vampires. That is one of the appeals of his books, that the story has kind of a little more thought to it than the average vampire.
I did have one last thought, because I'm not up for a Dragon Award, but I did have something kind of to say about them. When I was really young and I wanted to be an author, I wanted to win the Newbery Award, because that was the only award I knew about, because that's the one that our librarians constantly touted. Then when I found out about the Hugos for science fiction and fantasy, mostly by reading Dune, I wanted to win one of those. And now seeing the affair that is the Hugo Awards, I'll say, I think that the 3 dreams I have, one of which is to be a professional author, one of which is to be a professional author full-time, and the 3rd is to be a professional and also awarded author. My dream will not be satisfied until I get one of those beautiful glass-blown dragon awards.
Right now, it's definitely the coolest looking award out there, and I'm really hoping they just keep going with getting bigger and bigger, because if they get big enough, it really will be a fan-driven award, and people won't be able to mess with it. And I'm glad they're not putting their numbers out, because I think when they put the numbers out, it makes it really easy for people to game it. Anybody who knows anything about it. But if they don't put them out, it's private. It's just fans voting.
I also, like my wife, would like the award to get bigger and bigger, but I actually want the physical award itself, the statuette, to get larger each year until 10 years from now it's the size of a small car.
So you can hollow it out and live inside it?
A living dragon actually hatches out of it.
Hatches out of
it. There's one problem with that. We're going to have like a law of diminishing returns, because if it lasts as long as the Hugos have, we'll have one that's the size of like in Callaghan the Black or something.
Yeah,
that might be difficult to carry home. And if you drop it, you flatten a continent or two. So
I don't see this as a drawback.
Well, I ain't helping you lift it.
I know we.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where are we gonna put it? Anyway,
I know we're getting short on time.
Claim you own it.
Well, let's. Dawn, you want to say 1 or 2 lines about Codename Unsub, and then at least we'll have covered, some of our folks' Dragon Awards.
I'm almost afraid to. My internet keeps dropping me every time I try to talk. No, Codename Unsub is an apocalyptic story. San Francisco, or what used to be San Francisco, and it's just crazy. There's people going around torturing, setting people on fire, and skinning people, and it's just
Saturday
lots
night.
of weird, lots of weird stuff, and I love it.
It sounds like an average Saturday night for me.
Well, I don't know much about the other people I'm up against, except that at least other than Rick Riordan, who I've been a fan of for a long time. I've heard that he's gone kind of SJW, but at least he writes well.
So too.
At least one of the others I know actually rather a big book with a lot of followers, a lot of reviews. I'm kind of thinking maybe with the last day or two of reading time, I may actually read some of the other books that John and I are up against. But it is kind of fun. John and I actually, we used to joke about ending up against each other, and it's funny that it actually happened. So it's amusing.
I'm sorry, Judgy, but I've been Team JCW all the way.
I know, but you know I urged you to it. So.
Team Judgy.
Well, folks, on that note, I guess we should wrap this live stream up. And yeah, I'm looking forward to attending DragonCon in person and going along to the Dragon Awards and seeing how everybody goes. It should be fun. And yeah, we'll do this again in a month.
Excellent. Well, we will either speak to each other, y'all, from DragonCon or afterwards. So we look forward to seeing each other.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Take care, guys.
And
I